Hear me all right? Welcome to one more of our broadcast sessions. Today I'll be speaking with you about serverless authentication, and we're going to talk a lot about user security, authentication, authorization, and all those kinds of things. So without further ado, let us just review for a bit what are we doing here today. And I'd like to start just by making sure that you guys have the link for today, and I'll paste here in the chat the link for our guest chat. So just a second while I bring that up. And everything that we built and the code that I want to share with you guys and everything that's going to be in place today, I will be updating on a Gist as we've been doing every episode, and here it is. So let's use this as our shared text buffer. And just to review what we've been doing, we've been creating an app from scratch, from the very file new, and trying to go over the basics of developing an application for AWS. And today we're going to improve this by adding authentication. So far we've been handling public requests, things that doesn't require user authentication. I hope that by the end of today we're going to have a much more interesting app that will be able to perform authenticated calls, manage user identities, and so on and so forth. All right, so let me just switch to my desktop for a sec, and I hope you guys can see my desktop now. Let me just check if everything's all right. Okay, so and as always, this is very driven by your opinion and what you guys would like to see. So please do share. I'm JM Fairman on Twitter or just here on Twitch chat. Just feel welcome to send your opinion and what you would like to see built here. So for a start, let's get this the services that we've been using and what we have been creating. So in the first, I'll paste that Gist link here so you know what I'm talking about. And here on the first episode, we've made a static web app. We just created an app, and here are all the steps that we performed if you'd like to replay that yourself, and most importantly, our GitHub repo, which is this app, GitHub JFairman Breakless. It's not anything useful right now. It's just the code that I've been committing, and everything else will be committed here. So all the examples, if you'd like to share, and the things that we built here will be committed in this repo, and we're going to reference many others within the days to come. All right. And to serve our application, we are using two very important services, CloudFront and S3. Just so you guys remember, in AWS, amazon.com/products, there's a list of AWS products. If there's any product that I mention here and you don't know exactly what it is, this is the place to look it up. So we have this set here, and a very important detail on this page is this map of AWS regions and edge locations. When we store content on S3, we are storing content in one of those yellow dots called regions in several facilities within geographically distributed within those places, but yet it's just one of those regions. When we use CloudFront, we take advantage of all those blue dots that are distributed worldwide, and they are selected automatically for your distribution. And you, of course, that you can restrict which ones you want to use, but if you choose to answer it all with them all, you have a much better chance to have your content or your application delivered with less latency As we saw, we probably have one of those closer to the user than the origin of the content. You have better cost efficiency as those requests are answered from cache. You don't spend load balancer bandwidth, EC2, CPU or resources, and even more secure because it's not your instance against the internet, but an attacker will have to pass through this content distribution network to even reach your code. So this is a very good idea, and that's how we are working with static content. And then for dynamic content, we've been using this Lambda and API gateway. So they have two very different feature sets, but they work very well together. So let's move in advance and see what we can do with it. So here is a few Lambda functions that I have, ones that I can safely delete. I will do this afterwards, and the one that we built on the last episode was this list featured items function. And if we open that, we can see the code. So we create a result value and we pass a response mapping status code and headers to API gateway that will deliver this response to the end user. And then in API gateway, we map this breakless API featured items resource. This get call is mapped directly to this method request. And this is what we built so far, and let's try to get a very similar example working, a very minimal example, but with an authenticated call instead, and understanding how user authentication works within AWS. Okay? And as always, please do stop me anytime and ask questions and make sure that you're following. This is very special in the sense that we are beginners friendly, and I'd always like to take the time to explain and take any doubts that you guys may have. So if any code or anything I say doesn't make too much sense, just send word on Twitch chat and we're going to talk and develop this together, all right? So now, before we dive into the coding, I'd like to show you guys some resources that are going to be very important for us today. In our gist file, the link is in the chat, or I can do it again if anybody is going to find it useful. But here's what I have in agenda for us today. We should understand a bit of our architecture, and this is what we've done so far, and then talk about Cognito and its features and how to integrate that with your applications. All that I'm going to talk with you guys here is based on AWS resources and documentation that I'd like to share. And one thing that I'd like to make clear with you is that those services have been evolving a lot in the past. So be very aware that when you look at code examples and blog posts, make sure that those are updated, and if there is something that looks weird or that you don't expect to be like that, make sure that you're looking to an updated resource, because many features have been added to the service to make them simpler and easy to use, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. And that's why I have this reference talk, MBL 306 from reInvent, where my colleagues Jintram and Justin, they present serverless authentication and authorization. So other than this broadcast today, they go very in a lot of detail within this talk. If you'd like a further reference, please refer to this one. That's where I draw most ideas that we're going to use today. And there is also this other talk featuring a customer case and a lot of other further details into Cognito for mobile and user synchronization, and a lot of advanced Cognito features that we may not have the time to see today, but I highly recommend you guys take a look at this one too. And also there is one app, this Space Finder reference app, that may help us today, and this is from AWS Labs. AWS is repositories of open source applications and code with lots of examples and tools that we use, and this is supposed to be the standard reference for serverless authentication. It's a full-featured app. It's a conference room finder that uses all the resources that we're going to see today. One special difference is the web framework and the mobile app. They were built using the Ionic 2 framework, which is based on Angular 2 and TypeScript, and should be pretty much similar to our architecture using React, but we can see through this quick start guide and perhaps get it up and running just a bit later. Okay, so here's how it goes. And now let's talk a bit about the services that we're going to use today. So we're talking today mostly about Cognito, but we have to understand IAM and a few other services to work with this. And let me just show you the first part of Jim and Justin's presentation. And the idea is that for this app they built, there is this lot of content they need to generate, lots of screens just for authentication, just to get new users, sign in, and I'm sure you all understand that this is a very complicated and a very tedious task of most web development, and Cognito is the service to help you guys with that. The idea is that user sign in, just considering user sign in, you have to store user passwords. You know that storing user passwords in plain text is not especially a good idea. And then you learn that hashed passwords are better, but they're still not perfect. You have to select the better hashing algorithm, and they're still subject to lots of attacks. So we have salted hashes for even better solutions and being a bit more safe, where you add per user hash together with your password hash, and this would be much more secure and harder to break, but it's not still the golden standard. We have things such as SRP verifier functions that never pass passwords over the wire, so they're resistant to several attacks, and have this thing called perfect forward secrecy, where your data is protected against future attacks because it never travels through the network. So even if an attacker manages to capture all the network traffic, the data in itself is never there. So this would be currently the most secure way to do the things, and this is just for password management. Think that you still need to encrypt data on the server side, enforce policies, make token-based authentications, care for CAPTCHAs and personalizing these users, and you still have all those this is just for registration. You still need to verify credentials and verify email and phone number, verify, make the forgot username, and make sure that everything is pretty safe, right? And many companies have this skill and understand enough about security to implement this all securely, but this is not true for many of our customers, and this is something that pretty much every application out there needs, right? Like literally everybody. Who does not need authentication, right? So this is the value of Cognito, and in specifically, let's talk about Cognito user polls. That is the first Cognito component that we need to use. We can use that to register users, verify their email, confirm their registration, authenticate, and get JWT tokens. And this is how you sign in with Cognito user pools. And this is what we are going to implement today. The other part of Cognito is around federation. And of course that you can have Lambda functions to customize all steps, and you can hook Lambda functions into this process as much as you can until you finally get your JWT token that has all data about your authenticated user. And this is, we have actually 3 tokens when you authenticate from Cognito. We're going to talk more about that, and I just would like to mention this other component called Cognito Federated identities, because your identities can be from several providers. We can use Facebook, Amazon login, Twitter login, or any OAuth provider to login, and Cognito can manage and be the middle ground for those federated identities and give you AWS credentials according to what you allow and with the policies that you arrange, right? So this is the 2 components that we're going to use today. We have Amazon Cognito user pools to register and be one identity provider. You could use many other identity providers, but we're going to use Cognito user pools today. And federated, because many apps need their own user registry. They can't relate to social media and things like this, and Cognito is fine for that. And if we need to pass and get credentials for AWS resources, we can do that with Cognito Federated identities. And this is the app. And if you'd like to see this app live, again, it's called Space Finder, the serverless auth reference app that I'm going to try to do something quite similar today. Instead of using Ionic 2 and this quick start guide, let's go through it step by step and see what it takes. What do you think? What do you guys think? All right, and again, any questions, anything, just let me know. So let's bring up our app into the Breakless directory, and it is the Breakless React app. And we can npm start. Oh, let's open in the text editor first, so we have a view of what is here. And last time we've been playing with this app.js, a very simple React app. Let's start the app. So here is our app. So it's not too much fun yet, right? Just shows this list, but there is something going on here that may be interesting to see. That we are already calling our API gateway. We are invoking that function, and just to review how that is done, when our component is mounted, I call the API gateway client. This is a client that was generated automatically for us here using this API gateway feature on our stages. It's deployed to a stage named prod, and we can generate SDKs. That's our library for Android, JavaScript, iOS, or using the Java SDK. And this will generate clients that have automatic retries with exponential backoff and many facilities to make your API easier to consume if your client is written in one of those languages, or if you'd like to make this API available to third parties. But it's also up to you to invoke directly this URL. If you don't want to use the JavaScript SDK and you would rather send HTTP requests straight to your stage endpoint, that's all right, but you will have to manage things such as retries, authentication, and all those things yourself. So we're going to try to do both ways and see the difference, as I've seen people do it both ways, and I just wouldn't recommend executing the Lambda functions directly from the JavaScript SDK. While that is possible, it's quite useful to have API gateway in front, managing things such as throttling and make sure that nobody is abusing your API or even enabling cache and getting faster responses, as it is behind CloudFront effectively. So this is a different kind of content, a different kind of distribution. It's very specific to API gateway, but you can think of it as an application distribution that you should use to make your API safer and more performant, and in the same sense that we use it CloudFront to make our static content have the same properties. All right, I hope this makes sense. And now let's try to make an authenticated resource and create another Lambda function that's going to be subject to that authentication. But before we do that, and the way we're going to do that, let me show you here on our resources definition. When we have this method request, we have this authorization criteria and this API key required. And many APIs use static API keys to identify users, but it's important to make sure that those are used only for metering. So for throttling and for seeing how many requests you're hitting and things like this, API keys may be useful, but you should sign the requests and make a more strong authentication than just API keys. And Cognito is a service that does exactly that. So here we have this option to use no credentials or AIM credentials, and we have also the opportunity to use custom authentication providers and create new authorizers that can be either a custom authorizer that will invoke Lambda functions to check if users should be authenticated or not, or you can bind that to a Cognito user pool authorizer that is already bound to a Cognito user pool. All right, so let's do just that. So let's move to the Cognito service. And here we have those two Cognito resources that we were talking about. First, managing user pools, and then managing federated identities. Let's go to manage user pools and create a user pool for our Breakless app. Breakless user pool. I like to remind me of what this is about, or else we just create meaningless names and end up a bit lost. So we can review the flows or step through settings. Let's just step through every setting. And the first thing we need to define is which attributes do we want. So those attributes are going to be managed by Cognito, and you can say which ones are required for sign up and which ones are usable as an alias for the username. So if they can sign in with either their email or their preferred username and things like that. So yeah, let's choose to register by email, by phone number, and I don't know, preferred username. So we can sign in by either username or email, and we can work with any kind of details that you guys may be interested. The important thing is that Cognito will store this information, and you may have to update or read this information to Cognito and or sync it with your database, but you have an API for doing that easily. So you can also add a custom attribute. So this could be a string or a number that can be required or not. You have control of how this attribute works. If you would like, for example, in Brazil we have a CPF document, for example. Yeah, I'm now talking with you guys from São Paulo, Brazil, and in Brazilian applications sometimes this may be required, for example. Okay, let's just go with this standard attributes and kick to the next step. Preferred username cannot be both required as an alias, so let's set just as an alias. And minimum password length, so 8 characters, require numbers, require special characters, no. If you want uppercase and lowercase letters, I'll say just numbers and uppercase and lowercase mix is alright. Or I can say that 10 passwords is minimum, or 6, I don't know, depends on the password properties you consider secure. And of course you are more than welcome to improve this on your app and make a better UI for those things, but this is what Cognito will accept on the back end. And if you want to allow users to sign themselves up, such as a public website, you can do that. Or for some kind of apps, for internal apps or for enterprises, it may be the case that you don't have public sign up, you only want your admins to create users, they must file a request or something like that. Then how quickly should user accounts be created? Should be expired if they're not used. If someone creates an account and nobody claims that account, it's deleted within the week. Okay, and for verifications, for phone verifications, SNS uses telephony network, and this have a spend on SNS. Multi-factor authentication, if you want to enable those hardware tokens or phone tokens to generate and to be more secure and have an additional authentication criteria. Let's not do that today. If you want verification of emails or phone numbers, and this is this will send the code for your email that the user must provide to make sure they are who they say they are. And you can use one or both, and any app have different criteria for selecting this. I'm going for email as that's going to be easier to show it to you guys. And a role to allow Cognito to send SMS, and I can call that role. This role was created. Let's take a look at that in a minute and create the next step. So here you can customize the messages, and there are ways to further customize these messages. And how do they work? We can do this using Lambda functions, but this is alright for now. And you can say this message came from a different domain or from a different address if you have SES verified identity. Yeah, if you have your email sending from SES configured, what is something we currently do not. If we want to tag users for this pool, this is probably a good idea, and I can say that this user origin is from the Breakless app, for example. This can be any key or anything at all, any pair of values that will make sure you know where this user came from or how is it associated with your environment. And if you want to remember your user devices so that they don't need to log in again, this may be subject to, again, your policy and how do you want your application to behave. Let's not manage hardware and devices for now. We can take on that a bit later. And which apps will have access to this user pool. And this is very, very important because you can have several apps running in a single Cognito user pool. So if you have more than, say, you have enterprise CRM, and you have your enterprise desktops, and you have your ticketing system and your e-commerce, they can all be different apps around the same user pools and using the same users. So I will call this Breakless React, as this is the name of our beautiful app today. Let me just make sure if it's better to use slashes or underlines. I'll use the slash. I think this is, I'm never sure about those naming standards, but let's try to keep the same names. So React Breakless app, and how long the token can last, and this meaning after how much time the user will be completely forgotten, because up to 30 days in this case you can use the refresh token to renew credentials. And we're generating this client secret for this guy and enabling an API for the server-based authentication. We don't need that for today. We can talk about no SRP out later, and we're not going with custom authentication today, but we could have all personalized using Lambda functions. With the app created, here is the lifecycle hooks, the Lambda functions that you can set before your user sign up, after your user sign up, how to create a custom message before making a verification, before authentication and after authentication. And one that is particularly important is this define auth challenge and verify auth response challenge. This is how you can say that, well, this user in this condition, they need a CAPTCHA, they need an MFA, they need a custom biometric authentication, I don't know, whatever auth challenge you would like to impose your users, you can customize with these Lambda functions. I'm going with the false so far, and here is our user pool. So why Cognito is considered on the mobile service pack if it's ready for desktops as the same as mobile devices? Well, this is a hard one for me. I don't have a very exact answer for that, but one detail that is important is that Cognito also have the data synchronization aspect. So in aws.amazon.com/Cognito, it has these two sets of features: the user signing and the store and sync data across devices. If you have, for example, a web store and a user sets one specific item as a favorite in the web page without even creating a user, and then creates a user and then switch devices, Cognito syncs this information across devices, across accounts, and giving your user integrated experience on your app. And this may be the case. This is, of course, very important for mobile devices, and this is why Cognito is very, very important for mobile, even though it also has sign up and federated identities. All right. And if you can use Cognito as a standard open IP provider for other applications, well, you can, although it's not built in directly. You would have to write a bit of that yourself, Webmaster. But there is one example from the evangelist Danilo. Let me show you guys this out. Serverless. He written the sample authentication service. He wrote a full authentication provider using only Lambda functions and API gateway. So this would be probably the way to go about this. So if you're interested in writing this code, this kind of code, take a look at this repository. It's basically another identity provider, but exposing through Lambda functions, and you could do the same to expose using other protocols, but there is not one ready to expose Cognito directly as OpenID, not that I know of. Okay, and let's then use this user pool that we created. So how do we integrate this? Some data in this screen is really important, so I'll take note of them. So this is my pool ID. This is how I can get authentication to my authentication client to reference which pool ID I'm considering. So let's go to that text file, and I will add it to AWS stuff.txt. So this is my pool ID. This is the Amazon resource name of our pool. So this is what we need to reference if we need to create this. And then it's the apps, our apps will have this client ID. So we have this app client ID right here. So we're probably needing this data to authenticate with this user pool, and this is what we'll try to do. All right. And next, we need to authenticate users, and this is we can almost code this app already. So here in the documentation page, let me show you what we are going to follow today. So there is this, let me get a link to this tutorial, and from AWS documentation. Let me just edit this and add a link here. So, oh, here it is. It was here already. So I can delete this. Oops, it was alright. So integrating user pools with JavaScript. So this is the documentation page for creating the things for integrating with JavaScript app. So if you would rather follow the steps than watching this again, this is what you guys can use. And here is the Amazon. In the end of this page, there is a very important resource. That's the Amazon Cognito Identity Force JavaScript repo. So this repo is where all the code for the identity SDK for Cognito is stored. And here's all you need to use this authentication service. And this is very important because this is separate from the AWS SDK. So there is the AWS JavaScript SDK, and we've been talking a lot about it, and we are going to use this also. But it is a separate SDK because you may not need everything. You don't need it may be the case that your application wants to use just Cognito and not even touch any other AWS service, only authentication, right? Only Cognito user pools. And here is how it works. Let's install it, the Amazon Cognito SDK for JavaScript. There are setup instructions for everyone. We are using React. This means npm and webpack. So we are going to install these files in our React app. So I'll stop the application and install the webpack and JSON loader and save it to my setup. Also, we're going to install Amazon Cognito identity.js. All right. Now for the JDK itself, this should touch our package.json file. So we see that it's changed and added with the JSON loader, webpack, and right now the Amazon Cognito identity for JavaScript. And this is all we need to set this up. And now we can reference this package within our code. So of course we also need this user pool ID and the app client ID. We're going to need that for this code that follows, and let's go through the usage. So the way you use this code really depends on what kind of JavaScript framework that you have. So if it's plain JavaScript or under the original name, or if you're using Webpack and Node.js, or using ES6 models and transpiling with Babel. That's our case using React. So our proper declaration in our app.js, this is going, we probably need to structure this component a bit better. It's going to have a lot of stuff soon, but let's keep doing this here for a while, then we can refactor it into something more interesting. But importing Cognito user from Cognito identity.js must be this, and I will just comment this that we did earlier today in the last episode. just so that this doesn't bother us today. And let's move that to a different place as soon as we can. And now we should be ready to instantiate and use our Cognito objects. So the first use case that we have on this page, and let's go through this, it's registering a user with the app. So when registering a user with the application, we need to create a user pool by providing the user pool ID and signing up with the username, passwords, attribute list, and validation data. So this is the code that we should be using to authenticate, to create this user. So let's go and copy this and see if we can implement this step by step. Okay, so I will go and copy this on to, let's create a method first before we paste this here anywhere. Let's start to structure this a little bit better before you shout out to me that this sucks too much to watch. And let's then get a form running, or a set of buttons. I don't know. Let's start with just a button, a very simple thing, and have this be a reference. And I have this code here because I always forget it, and the code to create a React button properly. So this is it, and what we are trying to do is register a user. So this button will say register, and before it we're going to have, it's going to call me a method called do register, and the do register for a given event is going to just log the register user. All right, so just to make sure that our app is working, let's start up the React server again and get that rolling. So it failed to compile, and this is this is a common problem, and this type error read 0 cannot read properly from React. This is actually a known bug, and here on HTML Webpack, this is the issue where I found the solution, and very nice that we found this. I'm going to add this glitch to our documentation page today. So that's on Firefox, and our gist. Let me get that on the Twitch chat, and so yes, you are right, VG Master, about unticking the secret when setting up the pool. It may be the case. Let's see how that works. Maybe we can change the setting if it doesn't work, or create it again. Let's see how it goes. Just let me paste this for you guys on our document. So this is fix HTML Webpack plugin. I don't know if there is a better solution for this. Perhaps someone can point me to it, but right now the thing I found that works is to downgrade React scripts to this version and 070. So on our package.json, let's move React scripts to 070. And let's hope this works. And ta-da, voila. Oops, no, not today. Target container. We have something else here. There's actually two different errors. The first one is that the target container is not a DOM element, and let's see what's going on here. So in our index.html, we have this root ID, and our app is registered in the root element, so the ID is there. Let's roll back this app.js to its initial state without importing Cognito and all this. Let's see if this still works. Not yet. Let me just restart this. And I think I may need to npm install and make sure it reinstall this in the exact versions. Let's see if this fixes. I hope this, it may be the case that I need to clean everything and install Webpack again, or I don't know, perhaps it's something else, but I had this error before, and it was just this matter of downgrading the Webpack plugin, and it's exactly the same message as you can see. So that's why I'm assuming this is it, but let's see how it goes. So it's still installing and loading all apps on the tree. While that goes on, if you have any questions at all or anything that you'd like to see us code today, just let me know, and we can move this to all sorts of directions. Next week, the plan so far is to keep building this into a data-oriented app and have more content for us around this. And on twitch.tv/AWS right now there's a schedule with the next programs. I think I have it downloaded, and this is something I'd like to share with you guys while this is downloading. So make sure you stay tuned to AWS on Twitch. And today, this is what we are doing, API authentication with Cognito. Tomorrow, Abby is going to be starting Docker broadcast and all things Docker, and I can't wait to see that myself. I don't have that much experience Dockerizing stuff, and it will be a nice opportunity to Dockerize our Breakless app, perhaps. And then next week, I'm back talking about NoSQL backend. So now that we have API, we will have API working, I hope. It's time to store data, and we're going to do that in the next 2 episodes with NoSQL backends and with SQL backends right after that. and then we can move on to any sort of data analytics, machine learning, whatever you guys want to see on this channel, while we learn more about Docker with Abby. And I hope you guys stay tuned on twitch.tv/AWS. Thank you for this small commercial, and this was enough to get our software downloaded, and hopefully let's is it npm clean to get a clean object? I don't know, this is probably a different command. I'm not too much into the npm scripts of React creates. So let's hope that if this doesn't work, we can move on to refreshing it a bit deeper. Luckily, it worked. So really, this is the correct solution to this problem. Just downgrade your React scripts if you see that ugly message, and it will work. I hope someone that understands more JavaScript than I do fix this soon, but till then the fix is on our public gist. Okay, and when we click here, we have our React event running perfectly. So we import our data, and let's move on to the documented code. So first thing, we need the user pool data and then the user pool list. So in that code, in our do register method, we have the pool data and client ID, and those are in that AWS stuff document. So the pool ID should be this one. And the app client ID should be this one. All right. And as we import Cognito user pool directly here, we don't need this fully qualified name, and so this should be all right. And in the end, we can console.debug this user pool just to see what we are getting. And oops, I'm still fighting that new keyboard, and now let's check if everything still works. And I know it might be tedious to watch me code. I promise I'll code faster in the next episodes. I just want to make sure that we go step by step and everything makes sense from the start, or else we don't know where we can debug. And yay, we have the object that we expected. It has our correct user pool and client ID, so everything looks good. We are ready to move forward. So next we should set the attribute list and have all these attributes set up, and before we create the actual user. So what attributes did we have? We have phone number, email, and password, right? So let's create three fields, text fields. So we have this. I will have to glue here this input text placeholder with the username or email address, and this email is going to be this input. And so also we have the username, and also the password. So I think this is the correct. I don't know if there's a better way to do this in React. Again, I'm learning React as we go, and just to make to be completely transparent, I'm learning a lot of stuff as I go here with you. We're learning this together, and I hope you don't mind me making silly React mistakes. And even AWS is a huge realm for us to explore, and I hope you enjoy doing this by code and together here on Twitch. So here we should have email, user, password. We are forgetting the phone number. So right now we also need a phone. Yeah, looks all right. So let's get this information here. So for email, we have username, we have phone, we have password. And this equals this dot email dot value, and this is the same here with username, the same with phone. I hope I had Wesbo's skills with these editors. If you don't know Wesbo's, and if you'd like to learn more about React, this is what I'm using for React JavaScript. I've been most of my career a Java guy, so I promise you my Eclipse skills are much better than Atom, but as I said, I'm learning this, and I'd like to make a huge mention to Wesbo's at Twitter. So this is the guy who's been teaching me everything I know about JavaScript and React. It's not a lot currently, but I really shout out. Do make sure you check those videos, and their courses are really awesome. Thank you, Wesbo's. You've been a great teacher, although we never met. But he does have a nice Slack channel for questions, and I really recommend you guys check that out. Back to code. Let's see if he taught me my React correctly. We can now register the user, and we can even, let's start to be fancy and using some template strings from ES6. And the user is username, and let's go with the phone number and email, just to check if this is all right. And again, refresh on Chrome, and we have here our, so my email may be Fairman at, or Fairman or jfairman at amazon.com, for example. Let's say my username is Julio, my phone is, I think I have it here, this is it, and I will set just random as a password. Let's see, it's anything at all, and register. So user Julio, with this phone and email, things are looking good. So I got the email, username, phone, and password values just right. Email, username, phone, and password. So ready to move on with user registration. So, thank you, Ackermanker. Sorry, Ackermank. I'm not trying to read usernames, but yeah, password fields can be input type password, any React, and here you can use Material UI. You can use any set of React components that are much better than what I can do here. And I did not cover Lambda auth with Cognito yet. We're going to make this authenticated request right after we register the user, because without a registered user, there's not much we can do. So we are registering the user first, my dear Big GDay TF83, and then we are going to make the Cognito part. So stay tuned, we're getting there. So now the next step is fill this attribute list where we need the data, the email, and the phone pushed. So here is how we're going to do that. So the value of the field email is the email that we just created. The phone number is this phone number and this phone, and the attributes we can just import Cognito user attribute, and I think we should be fine. Let's just make sure that it is here, it is imported perfectly, and we pushed those attributes to the user object, and now we can make finally the user pool invocation. So this is how we add, and if there is an error, we are going to console.error and return, or else let's write this. Okay, I get this is just a matter of coding style. Don't know which you guys prefer, but here's a very simple callback. So if there is again, here we need the username, right, as a variable, and the password to register, and this looks alright. So user registered as so the result.user, and well, that's look just like it. Let's go to Chrome and refresh. Cognito user is defined, but never use it. Cognito user. So this is where I made my mistake. It should be var Cognito user. Yep. And Cognito user is defined, but never use it on line 49. Isn't that it? On line 4. Oh yeah, I'm not using this import yet. Okay. So now if we go there again, and yeah, on the app, and we need, let's register a user. We need an email, so I will create a new Guerrilla email. So let me create a random Twitch1 user at twitch1@sharksandlasers.com, and this is the same thing. I can just copy this to the clipboard and fire an email to that address, and it's going to be Twitch1, and the phone, it's +55 and my phone number. Let's just not use my real phone number for now, but well, anything at all. This I have as a macro just to fill it right away. And the password I will use Twitch1 2 times, and let's just call it Twitch1 with uppercase, so it validates against the password rules we've set. And oh, whoops, what was in the console? So I have a bad request, unable to verify secret hash for client. So there is something wrong. Let's double check. So register the user with that phone attribute list, and unable to verify secret hash for client. Oh, this is probably our client ID that may be wrong, so that 1AN. So let's double check this, and it may be really the case as VG Master 21 was cleverly warning us about, that this may not work with our client set. So let's change this in our Cognito configuration, because we can't have on a user pool, if we have this app, and with the app client secret, this won't work, because we would need to pass this. And let's just save this app changes and create a new one. So I will delete this app, add another one, breakless app 2, and just not generate the client secret and create this app. And now the correct ID is this one, and on the app.js we put the correct app client ID, and this should bypass this problem. So now on the Twitch, on the React app, oops, again, let's get that email copied. It's Twitch1 with some number, and Twitch1 invalid phone number format. So this would need to be +55 like this, and invalid mail address format. Which one was the email? I guess is it the first one? Yeah, the first one is email, and it wasn't this. This is the key. So copy to clipboard, and now this is the correct email, and register, and voila, user registered as Twitch1. If we go to our user pool, we can see that in the breakless user pool on users and groups, we have the Twitch1 username created but not enabled, or not confirmed. So we need to enable that. So here on the AWS management console, on our user flows, the second flow that we need is the authentication flow, the confirmation flow, because now, as we specified in the user pool, we're going to get a request. And where is that code? It should have been sent by email, and here in Gorilla Mail, here is our verification code. It's 33. We now just have to implement the feature to verify the code. We could do this in several ways. Let's just do with the same way we've been doing so far, with inputs and buttons. I'm not going to be diving too much into proper React, we can, as I wouldn't even be able to do this, I'm just going to break the lines and add new component. I'm not the most enthusiastic web artist. I hope that you guys can get better visuals for this, but all the API and the coding behind the scenes, everything that's not web design, we are going to feature here. All right. I'm trying. I will learn as much React as possible, and perhaps if one of you guys know your React, you can get us here. Yeah. And thanks a lot, VentureMaster21. I would debug that forever as well. And I'm pretty sure there must be a way to pass that credential safely somewhere, but let's not just dig into that right now. Okay. And now for the confirmation flow, we can just add another input for the confirmation code. And get it on the code, and another button. Oops, this button goes here, and and let's add a confirm button. And this will do confirm and confirm. I'm not typing anymore. The last broadcast we had severe problems for typing things. Let's learn this lesson and never type anything at all again. And now for the do confirm, we need that code in the second flow. So here is it. And oops. So on the pool data, we should have the very same object. So I will just extract this to a separate part, and I hope I can do this. I'm not sure, and keep it separate, right? Or is this something that is not the right syntax? Let's see how it goes. ES6 classes. Well, let's see. So this should handle that. Let's see if it still works in the browser. So this is not how you do this. ES6 classes and properties, I guess. I don't know how to declare this. Perhaps even before, as this is completely static, I can get it even out of the class, something like this, or perhaps in the properties of the class. Let's see which one is less ugly. So what is it complaining about? Oh, again, this is not. Let's do this step by step. So let's comment this for a while. And okay, pool data is not defined. So this would go our pool data. Yay. All right. So, and our email, our pool data is there, so we can proceed going with this code. Okay, so the user pool is again the Cognito user pool for this. The username is this dot username dot value, and the Cognito user, and here we have that user, and finally the confirm registration method, and with the code. So this dot code dot value and the result, right? So this should confirm. And this one, no semicolon here. And right now, if we get that email and the username was Twitch, it's by username, right? Yeah, sorry, it's by username. So username is Twitch1 and the code is 39468. Cannot read property of undefined. So this Cognito user is undefined. So let's comment this and just understand what's going on. Cognito user pool. Why it's no? I will just add it to Twitch1 and the code cannot read property. Make authentication request of undefined. Where is that? Make make unauthenticated request from undefined. Let's see what is this going on. Let's see username. Oh yes, of course. This is user pool. Yeah, this is completely wrong. Thank you, Newsmind. That's it really. In the user pool needs to be the user pool, right? Of course. This is the username. Thankfully, you are paying attention. Yay! This should be right now. And on refresh, if we get that Twitch1 user with that verification code, we should success. Yay! Thanks a lot, Newsmind1. Save the day. This is now our user, and if we take a look at Cognito, we should see that it is now confirmed. So we can use it to log in. So the following code that we should investigate is, here is the case that if you would like to resend, and I will leave this button as exercise for you guys if you'd like to implement that. Let's move on to authenticating a user and establishing a user session with the Cognito identity service. So here is the code for that. And we are now going to do login. So our do login method will be exactly that. And let's add a button besides register just to login. And username as this username.value. Password is this password value. and user is authentication details for the user. Is this imported? Not yet. That's probably going to complain, right? And Cognito user pool, and the same for this Cognito user. And here we again the username. Oops. Pool data is already defined, so we don't need this. And again, this is the username for this guy. I think this is it. And if we do it correctly, we get an access token, and we can talk about this part later. So we'll either get an error or a failure. Console.error is error. And all right, it seems that we're good to go. Okay, so here, let's refresh this. There is an error here. This is where the column should be, and authentication details is not defined. We import that as well, and good to go. So now we already have that username, Twitch1. The password is 2 times that. It's confirmed, so we should be able to log in. Oh, I bound the method incorrectly, right? This is do register, it's do login. So right now, if I Twitch1, password Twitch1, login, and yay, we have an access token. And if you see this is one of the tokens that we have, and right now we have a lot of information going on here. Let's dig a bit into this token and see what it provides. So here we have this result object from our authenticated user, and let's console.log this guy, and see what it is and what does it have inside. So again, Twitch1, I should have that to memory. And when we log in, we have these 3 tokens. This is what the result of authentication looks like. So these tokens have distinct purposes, and it's important that you understand them. So there is a nice documentation page about that I'm going to add to our buffer, and so you guys have it easy. So let me just find this. It's AWS Cognito JWT tokens. We'll find this easy as it's visited, and here it is, using tokens with user pools. So if you ever forget what those tokens are all about, let me just make sure that they are on our gist, our shared gist. Okay, and it's here on our README, and I'll add the link, and we can update it, and then I will add a better description. So here is the thing: all those tokens are in this JWT encoding. This is a JSON Web Token. It's a standard encoding for security tokens. And you have three of those. You have the identity token, and this is just a representation of your identity, and it contains claims about you. So it will contain data such as name, phone number, everything that was passed. This is your identity, and this token expires after 1 hour. So you should not ship this token, and there are many ways to care for token expiration, but you must be aware that these tokens are temporary credentials. But the identity token should not be used, it's just it contains more data. The access token, it's also a very similar token, but it does not include your user information. So you can use this token to access AWS services. So, and it will have 1 hour also of expiration, and it should not be processed after expired. But from this token you can retrieve some basic information about the user identity, but not the user details. And the refresh token is used to get new access or ID tokens after those expired. So while you keep the refresh token, you can get tokens again and again. So this is how the whole thing works. And these tokens have a specific ID, so there are libraries you can use to decode this, and there is a standard specification for those, and here's how they look like in the presentation I was referencing you guys. It has these fields, headers and body and signature separated by header, payload and signature separated by dots. And the header will contain the algorithm and the ID of the token, and then payload will have the decoded details, and the signature will be just the same, the digital signature, so you can verify the token. And here's their instructions if you'd like to decode and understand better what this is on the server side, and we are going to do that a bit afterwards. But we have it here, on this line, a successful token. And more than that, we can use this token to create and use AWS services. But before that, we don't want to authenticate our user again and again every time, so we should implement at least one other flow before we can move on with this. And this is the authenticate user restore credentials flow. So next here we could retrieve attributes for the user. So once authenticated, if you'd like to get the name or the value of the phone number and all those attributes, you can retrieve it like this. This is important on your profile editing page and things like this. The user attribute for the authenticated user can be verified, and you can delete attributes or update attributes. So this is like it is kind of up to you what you want to keep in your database, what to keep in Cognito, what to keep in both, but please mind that this is the code to edit those users. To enable MFA and disable MFA, we're not using MFAs today. Changing the password, we can keep adding fields and buttons for that, but I believe you got the idea of how Cognito works and how to integrate it with your app. So we can go to the more interesting apps. Forgot password, delete user, this would be the same way. One very important is sign out. So with sign out, you can sign out of your application and log in again, or with global sign out, this will invalidate all tokens on all devices, and you're going to be signed out of everything. And finally, the use case of retrieving data from local storage. So this is probably the most important one, and this is the one that will say if the user is logged in or not. So this is something that we probably want to do on load. So when our component mounts, let's just show username or try to find the username if that's shown. So, I don't know, retrieve something from the user and say if it's logged in or not. So let's call it load authenticated user. This will be more descriptive, I guess. Load descriptive user is like this. And let's see who is logged in. Just to make sure this is working fine. And what did I do wrong here? This should be a method like anyone else. Oh, I know this should be this dot. Okay. All right, so we're loading the authenticated user, and the code for that is right here. I will beautify this editor so that pasting looks fine. The user pool looks good. We have this pool data defined. The user pool is instantiated. The Cognito user is retrieved. And if it's not null, we are going to get a session for it and see if it's valid. And I don't want to get user attributes now. We're just wanting to see this, that the session is valid, and we are going to comment this this part for a while and just check if we have a valid user session. And if we do, we can move on. So yeah, we have a valid session, and just let's console.log this object and see what's in here. All right, so we do have that session. And one thing that we can do is pass these tokens to pass this identity token in the authentication header for user authentication, but it's not the most recommended way to do this. So we can use the get credentials for other services like this. We can the idea here, what I mean is, if you want, you can stop here and already have your users interacting with AWS and executing commands. But let's move on and see a bit more of how Cognito identity credentials can work for you guys. So here is how you authenticate this. I'm looking for better ways to describe this, and here is the part that we can move on to Cognito, or we can, there are some options. We can create a lambda function that takes this directly and invoke it from the console. There is well, lots of we can ship these tokens directly through API gateway, or we can generate the client and authenticate. There's several different ways we can interact with this. So let's just pick, well, one of them is through Cognito. I'll follow the examples just so you can see and understand what Cognito credentials look like and the different ways to set those credentials. And we've done a lot so far, so let me take the time to review what we have done. We're nearly in 2 hours into our broadcast, and I'd like to make sure you guys understand what's being done so far. So if there is any part of this that you guys didn't get, please don't hesitate, all right? And I thank you very much for standing in so far and helping me coding this. You have been most useful. I would debug this forever. So VMaster, you shouldn't store those tokens. Those are already stored for you. So VGmaster21 asks what's the secure way to store these tokens, and I would suggest that you that you use them in memory when you get them, and because they are stored automatically in local storage. And the Cognito SDK is, does that for you. And MCS Mike, yes, I do read the chat constantly, and sometimes I speak about the coding before getting to, so we can finish one step before after another. But please do ask and comment and anything you guys would like. We are coding here. So right now we're the thing that we did now, we just created a user pool, a Cognito user pool using the Cognito service, and the Cognito user pool will handle password and attributes storage for our users and how they log in and log out, from which devices and which apps can access those resources. This is Cognito user pools. And you can, although you can process that yourself, another way to integrate with further services of AWS, and you probably want that. So we need to understand a bit of the other side of Cognito, that is federated identities. If all you care is your user apps and you don't want to invoke other AWS services, and you don't need credentials at all, you can just use the user pools. But if you want to access S3 from your app or Kinesis or any other AWS services, you need federated identities. And this, let me help you guys to create, and let's integrate that into our app. So I will create a new identity pool and call it breakless IDP. And we have to set now if we want unauthenticated identities or not. This is the anonymous login. Are you granting any rights, or are you providing credentials to users who do not authenticate, and what do you let them do? Well, it is possible, and for a lot of apps, to allow unauthenticated identities. And this is probably, for example, in an e-commerce site, your shopping window with the products that you want. So here is the IDP. Oh, it cannot contain slashes, just underscores. So let's go with underscore for this one. And enable unauthenticated identities. And here is the authentication providers that are going to be supported. And here is the why it's called this weird name of federated identities, because your identity, who you are, can be defined by several different and autonomous systems that Cognito is going to manage for you. So you can use Cognito ID as we're going to use today. For example, this is going to be those settings that we just changed on our AWS pool ID is this one, and our app client ID is going to be this one. So now we are binding to that authentication provider, but we could be using Amazon or Face login or Facebook login or Google login or Twitter login or any open ID login. For example, one that I see some customers using, it's auth0.com. If you'd like to integrate with a third-party solution such as Auth0, you probably want to use OpenID. For corporate directories, you might want to use SAML or even your own server backend. So let's go with Cognito for now and create this pool. So we need to authorize. I'm creating this role. There are two roles that you want to create, and this is your authenticated identities and what are you allowing to them, and your unauthentication identities. And let's see this policy documents. So here is what you allow each user to do. So we are saying here that if your users are not authenticated, they will have credentials such as the credentials that are going to be generated for them will be allowed only put events into mobile analytics and sync data with Cognito. They won't be able to do anything else, right? But we can add that and change this to add any kind of resource that we want. So we can use the you need to understand this IAM syntax, but the idea is very simple. You allow some actions to some resources, so you could allow it to upload data to an S3 bucket if you allow anonymous uploads and things like that. But please be very mindful of what you allow an anonymous user to do. You probably don't want to allow him very much, right? And then the breakless, the authentication serve, once he's authenticated, there is a lot you can allow him to do. You can allow him to execute Lambda functions, or to add S3, or do whatever kind of resources that you allow. I will allow the full roles and just go with this, with the very simple ones, and then we can change it to something more interesting, right? And this is the idea. Now that this role is up, we can get the AWS SDK for Android and start using it to use AWS service. So here is the code. Let's get the code for ourselves. This is our identity pool ID. Oh, and I'll get right to that question, BJ, in a sec. Just let me take note of this identity pool ID. So BJ TF83 asks how we would allow a user to add S3 items that only him created, and this is using policy variables. So let me show you. IAM policy variables. So within your IAM, with your IAM policy, you can see that you can add variables such as $AWS username, and this will be interpreted by the policy evaluation. So here in this example, the user is allowed the get and put object in the bucket named myBucket only in the prefix of his username. All right, or he is allowed access in any prefix that starts with his username. So this is how you can restrict access just to your parts of your bucket. And the same thing goes for there are other policy variables you can see here in this document, but username is definitely the same one, and the same thing is worth for other AWS resources. You can set naming standards, for example, and using it on queues, or and there is other information, other variables that you can set, for example, based on username, on type, on source IP, or if it's secure transport. All these variables are available within your IAM policies. Okay. And now on that code, we can get the current user, and there is one more variable that I'd like to show you guys. And so for credentials, or our new set of credentials, AWS Cognito identity credentials. So this is a very special type of credentials where we say what is our identity pool ID and what is our and the ID token that we have as identity, and Cognito will return us credentials with that role, with that execution role. So for identity pool ID, we have this value, right? And for logins, we are using US East 1 for region, and our console our user pool ID is right there. And the token, and this is associated with that token, and if this goes right, we can console.log these credentials. And if this is all correct, nearly, AWS is not defined because we didn't install the AWS SDK at all. So we need to install and save the AWS SDK. And yeah, as soon as that is installed, we can go on and make that call. Just a second, let me get something here. Okay. We need to start this again. AWS is still not defined, so let's define that now. So I believe the right syntax would be import. Let's see if I have it somewhere else. I have, it's like this. Import AWS from AWS SDK, and this should give us credentials on our login method. Just so AWS Cognito identity credentials work, this is a class from the AWS SDK. We are now leaving the Cognito identity SDK so that we have Cognito identities. And one thing that you see here is that my Cognito identities that I just retrieved, it does not have an access key, it does not have a session key, or it's because it is expiring, right? And if this is expiring, and we need to refresh it. And the method for this is the refresh method. We have a valid refresh token, so we can call Cognito token refresh. I believe this is the right method, and here we can call this refresh method and get the credential. It will refresh the credentials using the get credentials for identity or assume role with web identity as appropriate. So you don't need to mix and understand exactly what's the difference right now, but it's good that it will it's just saying that it will delegate correctly. So let's trust that. And creds.refresh, we should have a function of error and data, and we could probably be using arrow functions through this all. I'm just trying, I will get to this refactoring and make this code look a bit better offline. I'm just not spending your time, and let's focus on the AWS part now, and then I can make the cosmetics offline. And I will develop this more offline and sync with you guys, but it's hard to get the focus for a single episode. So let's just end this by making sure we have credentials to auth into the AWS services, console.log the error if existing, or else console.log the data object that we fetch. And this should be it. So instead of these credentials, now we should be talking about logging. Let me make a very clear distinction that here is where we're talking about. And refresh it. Creds is not defined, it's creds. So Cognito give access to unconfirmed users? No. You can state that you can confirm your users automatically, but it won't give credentials to unconfirmed users. But you can have a Lambda hook to confirm users automatically when they create themselves. But this is custom. Okay. So right now, missing region in config. So in this object, we need to set a region that is US East 1. and now we have, why don't we, it's creds. It's the same credentials object that is now refreshed, and now we have access key, secret key, and session token. So for example, we can invoke Lambda functions or call our JavaScript APIs or do anything at all we want with AWS. And so there is an authentication gap between authentication and unconfirmed. No, there is no gap. Cognito, if you want to have the same data, if you sync it on Cognito Sync, it will automatically synchronize the data even after the user registers. So the thing you can mistake is unauthenticated and authenticated policies. That's the difference for that. What defines what you can do when you're authenticated or not. And confirmed is just for before you validate that you are who you claim to be, before you say your email is that or your phone is that, anyone that's marked as an alias. If you don't confirm that, you don't have valid credentials, okay? And they cannot be used. So for example, let's say that we want to invoke that Lambda function. So we have, we need to add these credentials to here we already have credentials to invoke and do anything we want with any AWS service. So we can, for example, for JavaScript AWS.js SDK for Lambda, and let's try to invoke a Lambda function. Class so here we create the Lambda object, and within the object we can create some parameters. We can pass parameters, and the parameters for all those global objects, all those options are here. And one important is credentials. So we can say that credentials is creds, so that it's going to make those authenticated API calls, right? And this should work. And also important, region in this case is US East 1. And let's try to make the same API call we were doing before with lambda.invoke. Well, let's try to invoke the lambda function first. So invoke will be the proper method, and this is how you invoke. Where's the invoke method? So this invoke, this is how you call it. And let's take a look at those parameters. So we have a lambda function called the function name. Let's get to that lambda function, and the function name is list featured items. The client context. So let's see what each of those means. The client context is specific client-specific information that you would like to put, and it must be encoded, and it's optional. So I'm not right. It's yeah. So I don't need this, and the invocation type is going to be a request response. I don't need to specify log type. I could send a payload as a method. I could specify the version that I want, but let's just make a very simple invocation and see if we get back the data or an error. And I'm voting that it should be an error because our authenticated credential does not have access to do this. So our React, we should have a 403 forbidden because the Cognito identity credentials, it's not the credential that we did, it's not allowed to invoke function on the resource. So we need to change this. We need to change this token to allow that. We need to change this policy to allow that. And I'm going to cheat and search for an IAM policy that uses Lambda functions and see how we can authorize that. So this is how we make a statement to allow a Lambda function. And on our services IAM, here's where we create those roles. So the roles that were created by the wizard are here. One role for the authenticated credentials and one for the non-authenticated credentials. Let's just authorize this call to the authenticated credentials and make sure that they have a policy. And let's create a new policy using the policy generator, specifying that we are going to allow on AWS Lambda the actions to invoke the invoke function on the specific function that we had. So we have this ARN here. Here is the function that was called, and this is the resource. So now we can add this statement, and so we are effectively allowing the invocation of this function to this specific credential. And now this should work. So we have the payloads that we expected, and once we have this data, we can do the same thing that we did earlier and set state. We need the copy of that object that is always equals to this. And here inside this callback, call this .set state data. Let me just make the same set state that we were doing before. So it's result.data. So this is result, just to be consistent, and result.data. This should be invoking our Lambda function and bringing back the same results. It's not this, it's that. That's exactly why we did this. And now, not result. Result is the result object. The payload is a string, So I need to parse this, and let's just set state again, and how we did parse this. I think this is dot payload. Let me see if I can find how is that exactly defined once it's called, and it's JSON.parse, the thing that I want. So here on for data equals, let's do it payload, it's JSON.parse the payload, and this looks good. Let's see if I'm not wrong. Result is this object. Oops, not this one. Too many printing. Let's go back a little bit and just print the data object and see if I'm going too fast here. I'm going to just payload, print the result, and let's do this step by step. So I have an object with a field payload, and the payload is just result.payload, and now it should be working good, and we can set state just to the payload, and because the payload will have the state. So, but the payload is just this object. It's a full object, right? I still need to dig it a little bit more. It's not the state that I want yet. So I'm going to just forward the payload print. And API gateway is coming. It is better to go through API gateway, and we are doing that in a second. Just keep tuned. We're just going step by step. I know it is. I'm calling the Lambda function just so we make it work without introducing new concepts. But right after we get this, we can get to API gateway. So now we have the object that we want in body. So payload dot body is the actual items. So var body equals JSON.parse payload body. And here it is. So we have the payload body in an object with items, and this is what we expected. And now we probably can do that set state with the body object that will contain the items that we want. I will just keep it printed, and here it is, the very same Lambda function that we wrote last time. But now it has a very important difference, and it is that it is authenticated. But how do we get the authentication data from our Lambda function? And it's going to be all in this event object. So this is, I'm going to ship it back just so we have it and don't need to go to the log and see and keep skipping from log to request and request for log. And there are a bit better ways to debug this. I'm just going to make the very simple thing of in our result, besides the item, I'm going to create a new field called event. and just return the event. This is the exact event that triggered our response. And here, now it's saved, and in the app again, we can see that, it's not here, unexpected token. Let's see what happened here. It's probably that there is an error in my function, and now we have this object that have the items and the event, and the event here doesn't have many interesting properties. It's not what it does not have the field that I expected, and we can see we can get it on the documentation, the correct field. So lambda event identity. Here in the context object, we can in fact it's the context object. So this is the one I'm targeting the wrong event, and here is the definition of those aspects. And this identity object will have the Cognito identity ID. So the correct way to implement this would be on our lambda function. Let's call it Cognito ID identity, or just Cognito ID for short. It's context dot identity, and let's not again copy things. It should be not type, just copy, and right now we should have our Cognito ID. So this is the identity that I can use. So this Cognito ID is exactly the identity context and that we retrieved from the Cognito provider. Okay? And all other variables that you can get all sort of interesting information from the context object, and here's this documentation page will have more information on it. I will add it as it's being referenced. I'll add it to our gist so you guys have everything we discussed today. And now let's move on to the final part, getting API gateway to work. So yeah, I hope Newsmind and BJD, I hope you guys are still there. Let's get to API gateway. So if you remember, on our API gateway, let's go there. On our breakless API, our stages, we can hit this invoke URL directly using the fetch APIs from ES6 and just pass the authentication headers in the JWT tokens as authentication headers. But then you would have to worry with the authentication and setting the correct headers and the retries if by any chance some invocation fails. So I highly recommend we use the generated SDKs. So here in the stages, in our prod stage, we can generate SDKs, and we did that last time. And this generated these files for us here in public we have this API client gateway that was generated by API. So instead of using this, instead of going through this Lambda process, let's not do this. And let's do the same thing we did last time with API gateway client. So here we have the API gateway config, the parameters for the request, the body of the request, the additional parameters, and we have the authenticated call, and then if it's a success, let's do it all at once, and we set the data for the request. It's very same thing, or else we get an error. And this is the invocating the same Lambda function and going through the same thing, but we're going through the API client. We just need to pass credentials now. So API client credentials AWS. I hope you don't mind me searching this much, but this is how to generate and call an SDK for API gateway, and this is already on our last episode's gist, but I'll add it to this one as well, because this is a very important link, especially here in the end where it mentions using a JavaScript generated API gateway, and in the very last examples it shows how to work with authenticated credentials, and it's just a matter of passing to the client your credentials. And here is the thing, in this client it's using access key and secret key for credentials, but this is temporary, so you need one extra credential, and this is the session token, right? Because without the session token you can't access you can use temporary credentials. So session token is equal to some session token. So those are actually the three credentials you need. So one is the session token. And where do we have that? It's right there on our credentials object. So let's just refresh this so you can see here on our Cognito identity credentials, we have access key ID, session token, and secret access key. So let's use exactly those fields. So here we have creds.access key ID and creds. Here creds dot secret access key and creds dot session token. And this may seem a bit of magic, but it's not. It's just that the API gateway client does not accept directly Cognito credentials, so you need to exchange your Cognito credentials for AWS credentials. Then you pass your AWS credentials to your API gateway client SDK that was generated for you, so you can make authenticated calls, right? And this is just it. So now the no access control origin header is present on the response. so this was not allowed access. So this is weird because we had that set for our object, and here let's just check in API gateway our resource. It's on options. Let's invoke it here and see if all methods are working. There is the options for the yes, of course we need to set the authorizer for our function, so we need to create the user pool authorizers to bind that authorization from API gateway. So it's going to be on Cognito EOS ist1 on my breakless up. Of course, I can't expect it to work without binding API gateway to our user pool and using this authorizer. And this is where you can set the authorization header and pass this in the authorization header, and you can test with your identity token. And you could use this direct. This would be more interesting, calling it directly from the you can use directly the JWT token here if you were not using the identity federation. But yeah, here is how you can set this up, and I will just make sure that this is working, and let's get the resource that we had, and this get method is going to require our breakless up authentication and be authenticated by that. And now I believe we have it correctly set, and we generate the SDK for this, for JavaScript, and now that we have it, paste it right into our code, and in breakless directory public, right where we had those files, just replace them with the new version and apply this to all, and let's see if the refresh works. It's not processing the, I'm not being allowed cross-origin requests. It should be responding with the correct headers. So on our function on here, we have the access control allow origin header set to everyone. So we should have this on API gateway, but let's just make sure that here on the breakless API we have that to test. And malformed response from API gateway. Something is going wrong here. Why it failed to execute? So I have this, I have the objects, I have the API ID, everything seems to be set correctly, the body, the resource, the result set here, the status code. Let's see if it, it's saying that the response is malformed. I don't know why, as it was working right before. Yeah, but well, another way to test this would be to send the send the request to the API gateway directly, but if it's not even working here, it's weird. The identity is returning null. This Cognito identity is this is probably not working because this identity is not set. So let me make if let me just make this very weird test. Let's just say that this is a string of empty string plus let's call it Cognito ID, and Cognito ID equals just an empty string and that file, just to make sure this is not undefined, and then breaking for being undefined, for not being passed the correct credentials. And now if we test this, we still have a 502 response. Because it's not with the correct headers. If we add the authentication header to separate authentication, and let's see that token. On the React app, let's print this token here just to help us test this. Here is the ID token. Also log this huge JWT token, and this should work. So yeah, this is probably not the correct syntax to ship this token. I don't know why this is not authenticating. It should be passing the credentials. Let's double check if these values are okay. So let's see if creds, if access key and secret key and token are being passed correctly. So I'll just call this and let's just print this just to make sure that all those values are being passed. So creds.access key, secret key, and session token. And it's still giving us those 502s as if you mistype secret in your code. And yeah, let's see if it's secret access key. Thank you BLNDMTTR. I misspelled secret, and now You see a lot of misspelling going on here, and I am paying attention to the chat, mates. It's just a bit of lag, but I will get there. And so we have the access key, we have the secret key and token, but again, it's just saying that my header is not present. And so let's try again the test on the API gateway. And I have another API that I've been using to test this. Let me just make sure that I'm setting everything correctly. One thing that I'm never, so this is, So the featured items is there with the credentials, and it should be with the correct Cognito user pools. I don't know if the options request would process this and require authorization, but I'm assuming no. And it should be with the correct headers and returning the access allow origin, but I don't know why this should be coming from here, from our response headers, and it's not. So let's see in Chrome what's going on. If we request here this on the network, this featured items, this first request, this options request is coming back to 100. The pre-flight request is working, but I don't know why the second request, the GET request, is returning me a 502 if it's sending the correct security token. But well, let me change this. So in the, let's test it again, and just to make sure the options here for us to test, use a column to separate header name and value, so a new lines to multiple, such as accept authentication JSON. So it should be authorization and the JWT token, just like this, authorization and the very same token, and this is it. But unfortunately, we are having internal server errors. Well, let me just think about this for a while. I have the correct credentials, I have them set in the client, and why it's not invoking. Malform Lambda proxy response. So I'm assuming this response from Lambda is incorrect by any chance, and let me just make I don't know why, because this is the exact same result. Let's just go back to the result that we had before, something static like this, or not even at all, just to make sure we're back to sanity, and have the handler call ourselves. So this is okay. This actually responds okay. So let's see if, again, we will be using a better testing and a better infrastructure on the future, but this is probably because this object may not be existing. So I will context, let's see if with context and context.identity. Then we set this up. It can be always a runtime exception. I should be testing this thing in a more appropriate dev environment, not just on the Lambda console like this. And so unidentified, and let's just make sure it's not this runtime error and test it, and still good, still returning. And now with the Cognito ID, identity being Cognito ID, and comma, and now, oops, shouldn't have refreshed this again. Authentication is that token, and we pass, and it's not being identified here. And I don't know why. I may have to check and return to you guys on this. Let's see. So it's not authenticating the call through API gateway, through the API gateway generated SDK, and it's weird because the credentials are being passed correctly, and we can see that credentials are there. I just don't know why it is not going through. Access key, secret key, session token, API gateway client is instantiated, and the feature method is being called, and it's successfully being called, but I don't know why it can't invoke the function, why the authentication is not actually working. I will work on it. I'll keep working on it offline and see if I can get this answered to you guys, and I'll certainly make sure you get this information back. So if I need and so I do need the access control. If I need the access control allow credentials true on the request, well, I don't know about this, because this should be set by the SDK, and of course I'm not being able to get that to work through the generated SDK, and it's probably a matter of the generated SDK credentials management, but I will figure it out and get it back to you guys. I know that I can just ship it on the authorization header, and this would make it work on regular JavaScript, but I really would like to use the generated SDK. So I hope you guys saw that we can leverage and invoke Lambda functions, and how do we exchange the client, the keys successfully, and how the user pool works, and how federated identities allow you to get temporary AWS credentials for a role. And this is the most important thing, that with user pools and identity federation, You can manage your identity and your applications as we did here for our simple React app. So we now have user registration, login, confirmation, and things like this. And we did invoke our Lambda function successfully with the correct authentication. I'm just having a few issues with the API gateway generated client that I will get back to you guys next week when I have it fixed. And we will also, because we are now almost on 3 hours of streaming, but I will certainly get back to you guys with this in the next session, where we'll also go for data with Cognito, okay? And I will just right now and just commit this to our breakless repo. So I will commit this so you guys have this app, have this code, and code authentication with Cognito user pools and identity federation. And small to do, I will auth with SDK, with generated SDK. Okay. It's probably something silly. I did this before. I don't know what's missing here. I will debug this and make sure it's the best possible pattern and good coding practices. Take a cleanup in this code and see you guys next time. And I really hope that you guys understood this and how client operations work. It is a bit confusing to get all those tokens and providers set up, but once it's clear, it certainly does make total sense. And now you guys have the code that's required to do it. And next week, we're going to follow up with the proper way to invoke those APIs and how to get those and how to make the data and start building data access and data collection and really turn this into an app. And let me know what you guys would like to code, and see you next time. And stay tuned on JM Fairman on Twitter, and I will always post the updated schedule. It will be always on the Twitch channel, and AWS Cloud's been tweeting that too. But I am JM Fireman on Twitter, so let me just paste this here for you guys. And let me know if you have any questions on today or any other episode's content. And the code is there on the gist that we use it today. All the documentations and everything we said today is here. And see you next time. Bye bye.